Coming up on the Grimm Exchange.
Horror films inspired by Japanese folklore with guest commentator Tara Devlin, the voice behind the Koabana podcast.
And staying in Japanese culture, our inner foodie comes out as we look at the most delicious dishes depicted in Japanese horror films.
And Ilan Sheady of Uncle Frank Productions is here to review The Killing of Satan from 1983. This and more on today's episode of The Grimm Exchange. Hey horror fans, I'm Mariam.
And I'm Simi, and welcome to the Grimm Exchange, your one-stop shop for all your horror entertainment news needs.
To stay up to date with all our content, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. Movies, games, television, what's new in the world of horror? Time to check out our latest horror headlines.
Let's take a look at the horror headlines as we have some crackers this week. First up is French-Moroccan horror film Candisha, written and directed by Alexandre Bustillo and Julianne Maury. When a group of friends summon a female demon, well, what do you think happens? All hell breaks loose, of course. The demon is known as Candisha, is said to seduce men before torturing and killing them. Apparently Candisha is a Moroccan myth, and the demon usually appears as a beautiful young woman with legs of a hooved animal if summoned. The film will stream exclusively on Shudder from the 22nd of July. Next is animation film Cryptozoo, written and directed by Dash Shaw. It's based on a sanctuary for all of the unloved animals in the world and follows cryptozoo keepers as they struggle to capture the dream-eating hybrid creature called Baku. Expect to be immersed in psychedelic visions with wondrous mythological creatures and a heartfelt message at the center of the story. Magnolia Pictures will release Cryptozoo everywhere from August the 20th. Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune will be on the big screen by October, with a first look preview on the IMAX. There'll be never before seen footage, music and a first look at the trailer. The full movie is coming to the theatres and HBO Max on October the 22nd, 2021. Can you keep quiet for A Quiet Place 2? Well, if you can't, you can certainly try by checking it out on Paramount+. The story follows on from the Abbott's family ordeal, where they continue to survive amongst creatures terrorising the world whilst doing so in silence. Along the way, however, they realise that the monsters aren't their only threat. Paramount Plus are also building a slate of original feature films, so there's more to look forward to this year. Fear Street Part 2 1978 is now available to view on Netflix and picks up from where it left off as the curse continues to haunt the town of Shadyside. A group of teens go to track down the only living survivor of this curse, known as Cybermen. We then go back in time to when the curse last happened and enter into an impressive slasher movie vibe. Fear Street is a trilogy, so we can expect the final installation soon. In the meantime, you can enjoy Part 1 and 2 on Netflix. Folklore is full of fantastical and bizarre stories that have been passed on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's no wonder that horror films look at inspiration in old tales. That said, we tend to stick to the folklore that we know from our own culture and are rarely exposed to foreign content in mainstream horror. The big exception is Japan. With us today is Tara Devlin, the creator and voice behind the Koabana podcast, True Japanese Scary Stories.
He was awakened by a showering of snow in his face. The door of the hut had been forced open, and by the pale snowlight he saw a woman in the room. A woman all in white. She was bending above Mosaku and blowing her freezing cold breath upon him. Almost in the same moment, she turned to Minokichi and stooped over him. He tried to cry out but found that he could not utter any sound. The white woman bent down over him, lower and lower, until her face almost touched him, and he saw that she was very beautiful, though her cold gaze frightened him. For a little while she continued to look at him, then smiled, and she whispered, "I intended to treat you like the other men, but I cannot help feeling some pity for you because you are so young. You are a pretty boy, Minokichi, and I will not hurt you. But if you ever tell anybody, even your own mother, about what you have seen tonight, I shall know it, and then I will kill you. Thus is the beginning of the episode Snow Woman from Masaki Kobayashi's 1965 anthology film Kwaidan. Japanese horror folklore abounds with such mystery, fateful, and often fatal encounters between the living and those from behind the veil. This particular anthology was inspired by a 17th century collection of stories about demons, ghosts, and bad karma known as the Kwaidan. However, the stories within this collection were inspired by myths and legends passed down over many generations, hundreds if not thousands of years, as is much of Japanese folklore. Tara Devlin, host of the Koabana podcast, tells us why she thinks Japanese tales are so popular outside of Japan.
Well, I think Japanese urban legends and folklore are so popular outside Japan because they present something a little different than what we're used to. These generally aren't creatures or stories we're familiar with, and that unknown aspect helps makes them scarier and a little more interesting. Then, once they catch your attention and you go looking for more, you realize just how much stuff is out there, and it's fascinating to learn about. They have a legend for just about everything.
Probably the most iconic character is a pale woman covering her face with long dark hair, the hemlin of her long white burial ground billowing in a non-existent breeze. Did Sadako come to mind, or was it Kayako? Neither Takashi Shimitsu's Ju-on nor Hideo Nakata's Ringu really initiated her popularity, though both franchises introduced this ghastly appearance to the international canon of staple horror characters. Yurai, Japanese ghosts, are defined by manner of death and motivation to return. The woman in white is usually vengeful. The weaker a Yurai was in life, the stronger it will be in death, which suits a delicate female quite well. Long before cinema, this apparition had been a popular character within the theater styles No and Kabuki since the 14th century. The Onryo are spirits of those seeking revenge on their tormentors. Victimized in life, they return empowered through hatred. Directed by Kaneto Shindu, Kuroneko is such a tale of retribution of the disadvantaged. The film takes place during the Civil War era in Japan. Soldiers invade homes like a plague of locusts, demanding food, sake, and women. Characters Yone and her daughter Shige become victims to these heinous acts and are left murdered in their home that the gang burns to the ground. When a mysterious cat begins to visit their bodies, Yone and Shige learn to transform into bakeneko, cat-like demonic spirits that trap and kill every soldier that dares to come close to their death site. Tragically, the one man they do love also becomes their prey, as the vicious hatred of the Onryo does not differentiate between innocent and guilty. Interestingly enough, ghost cat hauntings have gained such popularity that they have become a subgenre of their own. Examples for this are the ghost cat of Otama Pond, the ghost cat of Oma Crossing, and Mansion of the Ghost Cat. Although many animals appear as yokai in Japanese folklore, cats were particularly interesting as supernatural beings because of their unique look, the fact that they lived with humans, and arguably their attraction to lamps, more specifically lamp oils, based on fish fat, due to the old Japanese diet consisting of mostly grains and vegetables and their need for protein and fats. The cat's mysterious air was also often associated with that of the ladies of the night. Yurai and yokai in general, according to folklore, are spirits usually tied to an object or place. This means mundane locations can suddenly turn into a site of death. The idea of places we pass on a regular basis, or maybe even go to for security, becoming a serious threat lends itself well to a horror story. Hence, many of the popular films take place with hauntings at locations like houses, shrines, wells, temples, roads, and bridges. Stylistically, Japanese folklore horror movies rely on psychological horror rather than jump scares. The cinematography is atmospheric and mesmerizing, and the visual details are highly symbolic. The pacing of Japanese horror films is also different from classic North American and much of European cinema, often with a slow yet intense build-up, disorienting timeline, elliptic storytelling with episodic or fragmented narration. These elements work fantastically when it comes to misdirecting the audience and implying meaning rather than spelling things out. It also requires skill to direct the audience's full attention and usually some knowledge on the cultural background of the particular folklore. When all of that is in place, you get a film closer to a nightmare experience. So we can all agree, the many colorful characters, the heroes, the villains, the intriguing backstories, they all make for a fascinating narrative. We asked Tara which of the urban legends she would like to see made into a film.
Honestly, just for laughs, I'd love to see a movie made featuring Turbo Granny. The granny subgenre of urban legends is one of my favorites, and you can find both her and other monstrous grannies in all sorts of Japanese movies, but seeing them try to translate that to an international movie would be hilarious. Or something equally as odd, like the Gap Woman. In either case, they both seem like absurd legends, but when you think about it, if you really saw that in real life, it would genuinely be terrifying.
Many of the horror movies we watch are fairly formulaic, and we have a good feel for what to expect. However, when it comes to Japanese horror, we don't really know what to expect, and scenes that are terrifying, deep, silly, or all of the above can catch us completely off guard. When a horror film inspired by one culture is witnessed through a foreign perspective, it can seem more confusing and unfamiliar, adding to the uncanny nature. However, even to the untrained eye, a well-crafted, folklore-inspired scene is a thing of enigmatic beauty.
And now it's time for the segment that makes the monster under your bed chuckle, the Grimm Zone.
This episode's Grimm Zone is sponsored by Rocket Artistry. Rocket Artistry turns nails into works of art. Whether you're looking for designs of your favorite horror icons, or just want to put something on with a dark and subtle flair, Rocket Artistry has a range of designs to choose from, or can custom make your dream accessories. When putting together a complete outfit, don't forget, it's the little things that count. If you want to check out more of their incredible work, make sure to hit up their Instagram profile, Rocket Artistry.
Today we're teasing your palate with a scrumptious take on Japanese horror films.
Whilst most people tend to focus quite rightly on the ghosts and demons, we're slightly obsessed with the meals the characters are eating. So today we're taking a look at our favorite foods in Japanese horror films.
We all love a good J-horror movie, and let's face it, there are some weird and wonderful beauties out there that'll forever remain etched in our cerebrum. Another curious fascination is the role Japanese food plays in horror films. Whether it's pufferfish tails, tentacles ripping up the place, or the practice of a neo-taimori, there are endless Japanese culinary delights to explore. That's why we're diving headfirst into Japanese food in horror movies, where we'll be serving up a platter for you all to remember. First up is As the Gods Will by the one and only Takashi Miike. Student Shun Takahata is a gamer who's forced along with his fellow students to partake in a game of death at school. But along the way, they all encounter some pretty explosive events. After a gauntlet of games, testing their intelligence, endurance and creativity, the final test is up to luck, where surviving students must eat ice lollies. Once finished, the lolly sticks reveal who will survive. Next is horror comedy Dead Sushi. A researcher injects a serum into his former employee's meal that then transforms into flesh-eating monster sushi. Will you eat sushi again after this movie? Let's take a look and see. More insane sushi and a warning not to piss off any chefs is short film Monster Roll. It's a great movie that explores the ancient code of sushi making. Now for a nightcap with whiskey, ice cream on the rocks, and a woman who talks to corpses in a few freezers. Chilling stuff. It's a movie called Freeze Me. And we're back with Takashi Miike, again with musical horror comedy Happiness of the Katakuris, which follows a family of oddballs who run a dodgy inn. The opening scene shows a girl about to eat her soup when she discovers something inside. The film in general is mad, and even the trailer doesn't give it all away. It's just one you will have to watch. Next up, more Miike madness with the Yakuza apocalypse and some supernatural vampirism in the underbelly of a gangster world. They say don't eat peanuts at a bar. Well, perhaps it's best not to accept drinks containing old vampire Yakuza blood also, as it will get you right here. Finally, it's time for a classic dinner scene with film Hausu, also known as House, a bizarre supernatural movie that's frightening as well as beautiful to watch. The soundtrack to this film will have you humming to such macabre delights. Watch out for the watermelon scene, some piano madness, and a scene where a decapitated head takes a bite out of a girl's bottom. That will be the dessert. Thanks for watching all. More next time on the Grimm Zone.
Hello horror fans, I'm Ilan Sheady from Uncle Frank Productions, and I've been asked today to talk to you about a film that I believe goes underrated and deserves some extra watches. I'm a big fan of GRIMM Exchange, and I've seen a lot of guests come on talking about some fantastic movies, but I want to talk about a film that would probably be best described as a so bad it's good movie, but I have noticed that it doesn't get as much kind of like YouTube acknowledgement. So here I am drudging it up. The film I'm talking about is the 1983 Filipino production, The Killing of Satan. The Killing of Satan is about Lando San Miguel, an ex-convict who is supernaturally summoned by his dying uncle to save/avenge his town from a evil wizard who, as the title might suggest, is actually Satan himself. I think. I've seen this sort of film quite a few times and I still can't quite remember everything. A little bit of a backstory to this movie. This film actually did the rounds when I was in university. A fellow classmate managed to find a copy of this on VHS. And after they watched it with their other flatmates, they actually started inviting people to kind of come watch it with them. And because of that, it kind of started growing and growing. Each screening, they kind of applied their own commentary over it, and effectively it had the same effect as what The Room is doing in today. So it was a precursor to how these kind of so bad they're good movies gained a fellowship. One of the things that I absolutely adore about this movie is that just the amount of content that they provide for such a low budget film. Clearly, no expense was spared in making sure that every few minutes something interesting is happening. There's crime shootouts, there's emotional mourning sequences, there's spinning heads, there's a sequence where I'm pretty sure Superman 2 stole its villains from. There's some amazing stuff, and the passion and effort that went in from everyone involved. I feel that this film is closer to movies like Who Killed Captain Alex in terms of just raw passion, and I feel that it shows on screen. As much as you will laugh at the sight of the devil, especially when you compare it to the beautiful artwork that they use on the cover. I think you will be stunned. You will be stunned. So I know I'm rambling now, and I know I haven't given much away, but I feel that if you've managed to go this long without seeing The Killing of Satan, I highly recommend you do it. It'll make your night. It'll make your night. And it'll definitely give you some stuff to talk about with your friends. Go watch Killing of Satan. It is available on YouTube. I haven't checked to see if there's any way to physically pay for it, but I'm sure there is. And if you can, please do, because anything that raises the status of this movie is doing the Filipino film industry some credit, although I don't know how they feel about this movie. Our protagonist, Lando San Miguel, is actually played by Ramon Revilla, who I I've seen online that apparently he's the Filipino Bruce Campbell, which, but as a tagline in itself, is something to aspire to. But he was also a senator, a Filipino senator. So this guy's definitely a heroic icon. With that in mind, watching this man who just, when you watch the film, he just looks like a man just walking around dealing with stuff in this movie. And there's just something so perfect about it. Yeah, please go watch it. Thank you for listening to me. If you've watched this, please contact me. I would love to hear. My website is Uncle Frank Productions. You can also check out my artwork there. I'm a horror illustrator, animator, and I've worked on a few productions myself. Drop me a message and let me know if you've seen The Killing of Satan. Thank you, Grimm Exchange, for having me on, and yeah, I'll see you again.
We here at Grimmfest TV absolutely love horror films, and as you know, we also try to get to know the people who make them. For that, we link with some of our festival contacts right here in the basement. Not just any basement, but the Grimmfest Basement. Come with me, let's check it out. Okay, here we go. Yes, the Grimmfest Basement. What have we here? Rose, a love story. Intriguing. As you may know, we run festivals throughout the entire year as we are partnered up with Grimmfest, or Grimm Up North, and the Q&As that are conducted throughout the festival we upload here on our channel. So with that, let's take a look at some clips from the cast and crew Q&A for this film and see if we like what we see.
We were in lockdown in a forest making Rose before lockdowns were a thing. But yeah, no, it's been really exciting. It's been to get it to have now people see it is the most exciting part for me.
You've got audiences watching that and they completely relate to what they're watching. Whereas before it was kind of like us stepping into that world and thinking, oh, what would that have been like to be isolated in the woods? And now people are like, I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah, it's all pretty much hot off the press. We're in the process of signing with a sales agent to take care of the rest of the world, and we're doing a direct distribution deal here in the UK.
My fancy has definitely been tickled, if you will, but that was more of a teaser than anything else. And speaking of teaser, maybe we can get some clips from the actual film. Let's take a look.
You're a good man. I'll love you forever.
Why being weird?
I want you to take me out. And what was the food like?
Like really fancy fruit. Come on.
What?
Eat, please. You know, like lychee.
Yeah, okay, fair. Fancy fruit. What else?
Well, I am sold. I definitely need to see the film, and if you want to see the full Q&A, make sure to check out the rest of our channel, Grimmfest TV, and beware, this was screened after the film was shown, so there might be a tiny spoiler here or there. Well, that's all we have time for on today's episode of the Grimm Exchange.
Remember to support the horror industry by watching films, playing games, and reading books.
And speaking of films, don't forget to check out the rest of our channel, Grimmfest TV, to admire the marvelously morbid makings of our independent filmmaking partners and some of those fantastic Q&As with them.
And finally, a special thanks to our sponsors, Rocket Artistry. We'll see you next time on the Grimm Exchange.
Exchange.